Greetings, World Wide Web, and welcome to a video which in many ways was never planned to happen. I'd initially planned to let this channel rot until the end of days, and I'd also never originally planned on making videos on vintage computers, but a friend of mine who currently has COVID encouraged me to, so here we go. Now, I would apologize for the horrible audio quality in this video. My microphone is literally from the 1980s, but I feel it fits for the type of computer we're going to be looking at today. Furthermore, this was going to be a video about the Commodore 64 I have, but unfortunately the floppy drive I have for it decided to stop working the moment I want to make a video about it. So instead, we're looking over a much more unusual part of my collection here. This is a Vector-06c, a Soviet computer that I picked up on eBay not that long ago. It was introduced in 1987. This particular example I have here was manufactured in 1991. Yeah, this is not a clone of some Western design. When I went on eBay to look for Soviet computers a while back, most of the ones I saw were clones of Sinclair ZX Spectrums, but this one is indeed a homebrew design. It has 64 kilobytes of RAM, a Soviet clone of the Intel 8080 processor, overclocked to a staggering 3 MHz, and 5 arrow keys. That's about it. The ROM on this is ridiculously tiny, 512 bytes, though I've read of later examples having up to 2,000 bytes, and that is enough to display a bootloader screen. And that's it. There is basically nothing built into this computer beyond a blue screen and the ability to load things from a cassette tape. This is very bizarre to me. Even 10 years before this, when the first personal microcomputers came out in the US, like the Commodore PET, Apple II, etc., even those had built-in Microsoft Basic functionality, and yet this, 10 years later, nothing. I'm kind of puzzled as to how that came about, but this was the Soviet Union after all. There is almost no material in English on this thing on YouTube that I've been able to find. And in fact, finding material just in general for this online has been difficult. I found one video in Russian with English subtitles, which goes fairly in-depth about this computer, and I'll link to that video in the description. There's a handful of videos of gameplay from various video games, none of them with any commentary, but yeah, it seems outside of the former Soviet bloc, this is a fairly obscure machine I've got my hands on, and that's going to make restoring this challenging. Right now, I'm missing a few power cables, as well as any cables for the monitor or any peripherals, really. I also likely need a special monitor or a signal converter, since the Soviet Union at the time would have been using SECAM rather than PAL or NTSC. So yeah, this is going to be a very long-term project. I just want to get a short video out introducing this thing, just to have something in English about this computer on YouTube. And so now let's just go through a quick tour of this device. Starting off with the keyboard, this is probably the worst keyboard I've ever encountered on any computer that I've used. The keys are bizarrely stiff, and typing I imagine would be incredibly unresponsive on this thing. And some of the keys just get stuck if you push them down. This key that represents a sh sound in the Cyrillic alphabet in particular came stuck, and because I wasn't paying attention while filming this video, I got it stuck again. The highlight, however, and what was admittedly the reason that I was drawn to this computer, is the arrow keys. There's 5 of them. I'm assuming the 5th one is some sort of home key to bring the cursor to the top corner of the screen. But, I mean, hey, gotta give the Soviets one there. They outdid us in arrow keys. Meanwhile, aside from the keyboard, the overall build quality and feel I get from this device is actually pretty good. It feels solid, except for the very front, where if you press down on the plastic, it depresses the space bar. But overall, this feels solid. Yeah, from what I've gathered, these were made in several different factories, and each one tended to produce machines of different quality and build materials. In fact, that one video I found mentioned that there were different varieties of keyboards. I'm guessing mine was the less desirable one of those. Anyhow, moving around to the back, we have a series of mostly identical connections here. One for the power, one for the monitor, and then 3 right next to each other, one of which would go to a cassette drive of some variety, and the other 2 of which are labeled as being used for joysticks. After that, we have what I believe is some sort of parallel port, which according to my one source is used for things such as printers and some joysticks, and probably some other peripherals as well. And after that is a system bus, which would be used for things such as RAM expanders and something called a quasi-disk. It sounds like it might have been some sort of RAM drive. The translations I've found aren't entirely clear on what this is, and I haven't found any other information online, so oh well. Down here in the corner we have a little placard which says Vector-06c 2, and then what appears to be a serial number of sorts terminating in the number 91. When I saw this, I suspected it might have indicated the year of manufacture, and this was later confirmed by the manual. Well, again, we'll get to that in just a moment. The only thing that came with this one is the power supply, which is made of a completely different kind of plastic from the computer itself, and is overall, it feels significantly cheaper. I'm missing the cable to connect the power supply to the computer itself, but yeah, this would plug into a 220 volt Russian wall outlet, of course. And this also has a placard on it with a serial number. This one actually does say 1991. Based on the shape and design of this thing, my guess is it was meant to be set next to the computer like this. And since the Vector itself has no on-off switch, you would instead flip the switch on the power supply. And here we have the manuals for the computer. These are, of course, completely illegible to me, being in Russian, but I can decipher some bits of what's going on in here. This first one, it has this fold-out schematic of the entire computer, and this diagram here showing the full suite of the Vector-06c and peripherals. Magnetophone, which is the much cooler Russian name for a tape recorder. This next book of the manual seems to be a compilation of different commands in what appears to be BASIC, with possibly some other programming languages in there as well. And this final one features quite a lot of illustration diagrams and seems to be more in-depth and using this computer with various software. And here we have, going back to the first book of that manual, a sort of stamp of approval. Date stamped for December of 1991, which again, to me, is interesting. Now, this is the same month the Soviet Union itself was dissolved, making this either one of the last ones produced under Soviet administration, or one of the first ones produced under Russian Federation administration. And so there you have it, perhaps one of my more unusual and possibly most foolish eBay purchases, a non-functional Soviet computer. It's going to be a very long restoration project. I'll definitely post videos on it as I get it working. So yeah, I hope the video is interesting. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it and want to see more content. While vintage computing is not what I plan to be the main focus of this channel, it is something that I will definitely make more videos on, especially once I get the floppy drive on my Commodore fixed. So yeah, signing off.